What is up, everyone? This is Donovan One and Mekkah,
Hi.
and we are bringing to you what you've all been waiting for: actual gameplay. So, welcome to chapters 1 and 2 of my Fire Emblem 5 Paragon Mode 0% Gross playthrough. The first thing that we did in the main menu was to input a code to unlock Paragon Mode. It's a pretty simple code, nothing too complex, and we're just going to dive straight into things. So, Fire Emblem 5 has one of the most well-designed chapter 1s in the entire series, in my opinion. Most chapter 1s kind of treat the player like an idiot, but this chapter 1 is pretty freeform. There's kind of a lot of stuff to do, and it's also one of the few chapter 1s in the series where there are no enemy bandits. In fact, the only bandits that you're going to see on this map are under the player's control.
It's a very nice change of pace. So we've got a lot of units to talk about. Our lord currently being rescued by that Lance Knight is Leaf, and Leaf has some okay properties, and he's most importantly his light sword, his personal weapon that hits at 1-2 range and can hit on resistance. Fortunately, it weighs him down to 0 attack speed, so in the long term it's really dangerous to use if you've got fast enemies nearby. Next to him is Finn, a fatherly figure to Leaf. Finn's biggest deal, besides the fact that he's on a horse, is that he has a personal weapon called the Brave Lance, and if you're familiar with brave weapons from other games, then you'll know just how good that is, especially when you get it in Chapter 1. And then there's a pair of very interesting axe fighters that we probably should discuss.
Right, so they kind of fit like the beginning axe fighter archetype. Their base stats are pretty similar, and they start at a pretty low base level. So at first glance you might think that, they're pretty much interchangeable. In fact, they are not. The axe fighter at the bottom of the map trying to visit his house is Orsin, and the axe fighter over following where Leaf and Finn are going, his name is Halvan. And despite their stats being similar, in Fire Emblem 5 there are numerous other subtle characteristics aside from stats that determine what a character is good at, and basically Orsin has many more of these than Halvan. For example, Orsin's house, he has to visit it in order to get his personal axe, the Pugi, which we're going to discuss next chapter when he actually gets to use it. Halvan's also trying to visit his house over on the right side of the map, which is currently blocked by a soldier. It contains the Brave Axe, but unlike Orsin's Pugi, it is not locked to Halvan, so anybody with D-rank axes can use the Brave Axe, which automatically kind of makes Halvan a little worse.
So the model figure to Leaf is Eyvel, the swordmaster that's accompanying him right now. She joins with 20 speed, which is the cap for speed for every class in this game, so that alone shows just how powerful she is. No matter what the RNG does, Eyvel cannot die in the early game. She's literally invincible. She's got the fire sword, which is not a personal weapon, but it might as well be. It gives +5 magic, and it also hits at 1-2 range, and it can also hit on resistance, so it's really powerful. And that leaves us with the bandits that just joined us.
Right, so there's the kind of generic looking bandit that's kind of looking straight ahead. His sprite is a little less ornate than the other bandit on the map. The less ornate one, he's unpromoted, his name is Marty. He's a pretty bad unit because his base stats and skill and speed are literal zeros, so he's not very good at combat. He's accompanied by a female bow user, her name is Tanya. She's also pretty bad because bow users follow the trend in this game of generally being quite mediocre. They can't capture in this game, and a lot of combat happens on enemy phase, so they can't really do a whole lot. Plus Tanya's strength is also, it leaves much to be desired. Now they're joined by a third character. He's a more ornate looking bandit, he's actually a warrior. He is Tanya's father, and he is ridiculous. His name is Dagdar. He joins with the second highest HP and strength basis in the entire game in Chapter 1. It used to be that people thought Dagdar was really bad because his growth rates when he had them were almost non-existent, but his base stats are just the best.
Besides the 2 villages that have access, we've got other villages that we could visit. There's 2 that give worthless things like a Vulnerary and an Iron Sword. We're not going to visit those, but the village that Dagdar is freeing and Finn is going to visit contains a life ring, and that does the same thing as Angelic Robe in other games. It gives +7 HP, and it is very useful to have in the long term.
Yep, so after we collect the life ring, Leaf is going to seize the little house thing, and we're going to move on to Chapter 2. So that's Chapter 1 completed in 4 turns.
Chapter 2 is more like traditional Chapter 1s from other Fire Emblem games. The plot is just bandits are attacking villages, we need to save them. That is exactly what we need to do, save all the villages in order to unlock the guidance chapter that comes after this. But other than that, it's just a siege map where Leaf needs to get to the gate, so Finn carries him and Eyvel goes along to kill the boss. We have a couple of side objectives in this chapter, besides the villages. Orsin needs to get as much XP as possible because we want him to get to level 10 so we can promote. We also want to capture some enemies because they have some very useful gear. They have some weapons that we want, and they have Vulneraries.
Right, the Vulneraries in particular are what we're looking for. There are two enemies in this map that start with Vulneraries. They are very powerful in this game because they are more like elixirs in the later Fire Emblem games. When a unit uses a Vulnerary, it heals all of his HP instead of only a measly 10 HP. So when we try to capture enemies, we're going to attempt to use the most reliable setups possible, and that usually means using a Brave weapon. Units who can use Brave weapons and who also have high strength and high build or are mounted are excellent units for capturing enemies, and so most of the time you're going to see units such as Finn, because he's mounted and he has the Brave Lance that only he can use, or Dagdar, because he has very high base strength, he has one of the highest base constitutions in the game, and he can use the Brave Axe. You're going to see one of those two characters capturing enemies a whole lot.
Halvan got the first village with the Vulnerary. The village that Marty is going to visit has a new recruitable character. His name is Ronan, and he is an archer just like Tanya. He has an extra point of movement, which is going to come into play later, but other than that, he's very unremarkable. His combat is just about as bad. The last village has a speed ring, which is like the speed wings from other games, except it gives like +3 speed, so it's even better, and you'll see why it's important later on.
So at about this point, Orsin has just about cleared out all the enemies that start near the starting point, and this is no fluke. He is a combat prodigy. There are 3 reasons why he is so good at combat. The first is because he has a skill called Wrath, which in this game guarantees a critical hit on a counterattack if an enemy initiates a round of combat. So on top of that, he also has his axe, the Pugi, that he obtained in the previous chapter. It's an excellent axe. It has 1-2 range, it has a good base might, good base hit, and an important 30 base critical, which in conjunction with his pursuit critical coefficient of 3 allows him to get guaranteed critical setups even on player phase. Now what pursuit critical coefficient is, every character in this game has a hidden stat that ranges from 0 to 5, and if a unit double attacks, then his second attack multiplies his display critical rate in battle by the pursuit critical coefficient. So a unit such as Orsin, who will usually have at least 34 critical, will have 100 critical on his second attack.
Eyvel does the boss killing again because he's so efficient at it with the magic sword, the fire sword. It hits on resistance instead of defense, and that's very useful when the boss is standing on a gate or a throne, since those give +10 defense. And in combination with Adept and her high critical, that just makes it very easy for her to kill bosses.
Right. It's worth pointing out that the boss in this chapter actually has some stat variation, so sometimes he won't be 2-hit KO'd by the fire sword, and that's why we check the stats at the very beginning of the chapter. So that is chapter 2, finished in 4 turns. We'll see you next time.
See ya.